What's going on, you guys? My name's Ty Knotts and welcome to Top 5 Unknowns. 5 creepy stories from Reddit. Number 5. I was sitting on the balcony drinking tea in the morning when I heard screeching tires and saw 2 boys around 13 years old running madly. The balcony faced a boulevard with the bus stop not far away. Behind that side of the building was a courtyard with rows of apartments on either side. One of the boys ran into the courtyard side. The other boy unwisely stayed on the boulevard side. Less than 20 meters from me, the boy was stopped by a car. The car had a fake wooden license plate. 2 men got out to take the boy, and I'd never seen eyes like theirs. They had the look of an animal in a hunting mode. It's difficult to explain. There were a lot of people out on their balconies who witnessed this. One of the men grabbed the boy and started pulling him toward the car. A woman then yelled, "Let him go, I've called the police. I have descriptions of you and your car, and the police will find you immediately." Then another woman also yelled, "I called the police as well. I can describe you and your vehicle." At the time in the USSR, vehicles were not particularly common, so finding the owner even without a license plate would not have been difficult. The men ended up jumping into their car without the boy and took off. The boy was met by someone on the street who then offered to take him home. I later learned that the boys were waiting outside for their school bus. I don't know if the men were ever caught, but I never saw them again. Number 4. In 7th grade, I had this really weird physics teacher. I didn't like him from the very beginning. He wasn't suited for the job at all since he had a terribly short temper and a confusing way of explaining things. But other than him being a genuinely bad teacher, he was really fishy. He would always compliment the pretty and popular girls, saying how nice their hair looked and how great a certain color looked on them. Sometimes he would make comments about how short some of their shorts were as well. I know that this is nothing too bizarre, but given that he was in his mid-50s when he taught in our school, and that all of us were 12 or 13 years old, I find it a bit weird. It's also the way that he said it. It wasn't in a nice tone, it just made everybody feel uncomfortable. I remember that one day he went behind this girl in the middle of class and started stroking and sniffing her hair, while saying stuff like, "You have a beautiful thick hair. You must take really good care of it, it's so soft." He did this a few times, almost always with the same girl. One day though, he just stopped showing up for school. He hasn't taught here for quite some time now and no one knows where he went. He could have been reported, I suppose, but it's also possible he could have been jailed. I'm telling you, this guy was class A creep. There's no telling what he did in his free time. Number 3. This started when I was in the 8th grade and I had several interactions with this guy. At the time, I was super into dyeing my hair. I did all sorts of colors. Well, one day when I was walking home, a man with a pink strip in his hair drove past me and told me that he liked my hair. No big deal, and I was happy for the compliment. But from there, it started getting weird. A few days later, he showed up on my way home again. This time, he was walking with a small boy. He said that he was new to town and was looking for friends. He then complimented my hair again and gave me a CD of some musician that he liked. Keep in mind, this man was at least 40 and I was very clearly a child. Purple and pink hair, backpack, and the only school nearby was the middle school that I went to. So I nervously just accepted the CD and got out of there as fast as I could, taking weird shortcuts and wrong turns on the way home. He continued to show up with his toddlers several more times. Each time I would either turn around or take another way home or even ignore his attempts altogether. Eventually he seemed to give up and I didn't see him for months. Until I started high school. I was walking home from high school and there he was. Keep in mind, the high school and middle school are several miles apart. He spots me across the street and loudly says to this child, "She used to go the other way." He starts crossing the street and I walk away as fast as I can. I don't know if this is all just some sort of weird coincidence or if he was really just as creepy as he seemed to be. Either way, I haven't seen him in a few years and I hope I never do. Number 2. This actually happened yesterday. I was making a late trip to Domino's to pick up dinner. They didn't have my pizza ready yet, so I left to go over to Publix next door. The guy saw me and waved me down. I stopped for who knows why, and he caught up to me asking if I had any cash. I replied no, and he pointed to the money sticking out of my pocket. I told him that I had to buy pizza for my family, and he responded, "So your family who's eaten every night this week needs more food than a guy who hasn't eaten anything in 9 days?" I responded with a sure and walked away. got a cart, and went into Publix. I thought that was the end of it and went to check around. I was walking down the cereal aisle when I heard a cart run into a shelf. I turned around and it was the same guy. I'd wondered if he'd been following me. I just sort of forgot about it, thinking that he wasn't. So I get to the checkout with the cereal and he's sitting on the bench. I quickly paid and started walking out as he came up. He tried to push me away from my cart to steal it, and I pushed him pretty hard back. He fell but managed to grab the money out of my pocket and ran away. Security then ran after him, but the guy got away. I had to pay for the pizza with a card, which is money out of my account, not my parents', which is supposed to just be for gas money. Could have been worse, I guess. Number 1. This all started last year when I bought my first house. It was a great deal for a piece of property in a nice area since it was located next to a party house. Strange people were in and out all the time, and there was lots of screaming at each other late at night. 2 times they knocked on my door to borrow my phone to call the paramedics. It was unpleasant, but most of them were polite and didn't really bother me. All but one person. This guy gave me weird vibes from the start. He cornered me one day when I was taking out the trash and introduced himself. He started hounding me for my name, which I reluctantly gave him, not wanting to be a rude neighbor since it was my first time living somewhere like this. He then pressed me for my last name and who my parents were. I started getting uncomfortable when he then asked if my parents were home. I live alone with my dog, but I didn't want him to know that, so I said that they were. He then asked me if I work and where I work. I told him I had to go and just carried on my way. He then asked me if I wanted to come party and motioned towards the house. Remind you, this was in the middle of the day. Extremely uncomfortable now, I ended up not answering and just going back into my house. A few times after that, he tried to talk to me again while I was taking out the garbage, and being a wimp that I was back then, I just pretended not to hear it. He'd carry on the conversation with himself one-sided or just repeat my name over and over trying to get my attention, but never said anything particularly alarming. I figured I gave him an inch by talking to him once, and now he was trying to buddy me up for some sort of favor or something. I wish that was it, but it's not. 2 months later, my root cellar flooded because a water line from the party house broke. My cellar is a rusty metal staircase down into a concrete hole, with no other exits beyond the stairs which lead up to my front yard, typically covered with a heavy hatch that sits as part of my deck. I was in the middle of taking out buckets of water when he stood at the top of the stairs and blocked my path. I was terrified. The cellar is soundproof because it's under my house and I was home alone. My dog was in the house upstairs and I didn't have direct access to it. I also didn't have my phone because I didn't want to get it wet. He asked me what I was doing. I told him my cellar was flooded and he took a step down the stairs. I stepped back into the water and he advanced after me. I told him that it was okay and that I had it handled and that he needed to be careful because the water could be electrically charged, but that I was safe because I was wearing rubber boots. Thankfully, this made him stop and he left without saying another word. It was a big fib because my power was off, but it was the only way I could think to get out of this conversation at the time. I waited half a minute to make sure he was gone before booking it up the stairs and straight into my house. I borrowed a pump the next day from a family friend so that I wouldn't be stuck in the cellar alone for extended periods of time again. He continued to try talking to me from time to time, but the water was shut off at the party house, so he was showing up less and less. Eventually, the building was evicted. Some people still wandered around the property from time to time, but never him. It was torn down some months later. But fall eventually came and there was a knock at my door. And you guessed it, it was the neighbor. He asked me if I remembered him. I told him I'd never seen him before in my life, and he told me to have a safe night and left. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep updated with our videos.